Restoration. My name is Sean Cosgrove. I'm with the Conservation Law Foundation, which is an organization based in New England. We are scheduled in this room for the workshop until 5:30. I was just told that the bar officially does not open out here until 5:30. It says in the agenda it opens at 5, so you don't have to worry about missing your first drink. The other important piece of information is, according to some experts, the apocalypse will start promptly at 6 p.m. today. Some of you have seen this, so we will need to move through the panel, get a drink before that happens. So we'll try and be prompt. Okay. So the focus of this workshop is we have a great panel. I'm going to introduce them one by one. They're going to do presentations. Then we'll do question and answer. This is a cozy room, a nice group. We want to have the conversation flowing. The key to workshop is interactive learning, I think. So technically, we have not carved out space for just audience members diving in, but I think it's a good enough room that we can try and do that later on and just have a good conversation. The key to workshop is learning, right? Learning from each other. All right, so the official introduction here is as we navigate declining budgets and political partisanship, what are the options available to the conservation community to continue making progress with efforts to restore critically important ocean and coastal ecosystems? That's a big question. There's a lot. Most folks in this conference and in this room are going to know that there's a lot of economic value, a lot of job creation related to the opportunities in restoration. There's a lot of a large part of our national gross domestic production, a large part of our population is based in shore-adjacent communities. Shore-adjacent meaning on coasts and in the Great Lakes, and that's a large part of our economy. I'm just going to touch on a couple here. With only 18% of U.S. land area, these shore-adjacent counties accounted for 36% of our population and 42% of the national economic output in 2007. Coastal tourism recreation dominated both employment and GDP in the ocean economy sectors with 1.7 million jobs and nearly $70 billion of GDP. In 2008, recreational fishing supported 384,000 jobs and had a support base of 12.4 million anglers, spending $4.9 billion annually. In 2008, the commercial seafood industry supported 1.5 million jobs and generated $104 billion in sales impacts. Clearly, this healthy coastal ecosystems are a big part of our economy, also vitally important for recreational use and the cultural connection in our communities and for our connection to a healthy ocean. So if you think about all the economic benefit that we get from healthy ecosystems, what is it that we do to invest in maintaining, protecting, and restoring those? Between 1970 and 2006, federal expenditures on oceans and coasts as a percent of the federal budget decreased 57% from 0.6% to 0.3%, which means from $5.2 billion to $6 billion in constant dollars, a declining increase over 36 years. In 2008, the federal government spent $9.5 billion, or 0.3% of the federal budget, on oceans, coasts, and Great Lakes programs. A small amount of investment, relatively, the amount of economic wealth and value that we get from healthy ocean ecosystems. And I don't mean just coastal economies, but the foundation of healthy coasts and healthy ocean ecosystems and the estuaries, streams, the beaches that people visit. We talk a lot about, I'm pointing out the economic benefits of these ecosystems because when we talk about restoration and the need to invest in that, the first answer that we generally hear is, well, it's a tight economy. Well, we have a huge budget debt, and those things are true. Even before the current recession, we still had those answers from congressional decision makers. So this is an important part of not just those of us that think about the environmental benefits or the recreational benefits of the coasts and the places that we care about, but how do we make the argument and how do we look at the economic benefits so that we can use that in a most beneficial way to create the investment that we need to be able to do the actual restoration to maintain healthy ecosystems. So I'm going to get our panel up here. Our first presentation will be from Tim Dillingham, who is the Executive Director of the American Littoral Society. He has been the director since 2003. He has 20 years of experience in coastal management and policy development in government agencies and nonprofit organizations. Tim has a very lengthy and impressive resume, which I'm not going to read everything through here. But he has been, as I said, Executive Director since 2003, and really focuses on the advocacy, education, and conservation programs and moving restoration into the 21st century. So, is that working? Anything else I left out?
That works.
Let's make sure. Who is our tech agent in the room, by the way? He left. Thank you. All right, let's get this up here.
I don't think the projector's on.
I'm seeing a green light.
Are we seeing a green
I'm
light?
not seeing, yeah. I hope it's on the warm-up mode.
Is that better? I hear it now. It should be coming, yeah.
Yeah, I'm not a Mac guy either.
Yeah.
So you have to actually press.
It's like a reverse episode of 24, right?
I'm seeing it on the screen here. Yeah, what happens in 20 seconds? There we go.
Yeah. Okay, great. Thanks, Sean.
You got that remote there?
I do, yeah. And then we settings once again. So good afternoon. A little bit about the Littoral Society. We're based in Sandy Hook, in New Jersey, right on the entrance to the Hudson-Raritan Estuary. You look out my office window and you're looking at Manhattan Island. We work primarily in Jamaica Bay and New York City, some work in the Hudson, the Atlantic coastal areas of New Jersey, and in Delaware Bay. We also work a bit nationally, primarily on restoration policy and restoration programs through Restore America's Estuaries, which is a national alliance of 11 regional groups. And I have the great privilege to just have been drafted into being the chairman of the board of directors there. Jeff Benoit is the president and really is the brains behind the operation. But I wanted to
Advance the slide. Come on.
Try pressing the button.
I'm getting that love over here.
You think that's forward, right?
I know there's another slide. I've seen it.
If you press escape, you should get out of it.
Emily, is this your computer?
Look at this. Can I get you out of this?
Yeah, there are more slides.
We can do it the old-fashioned way.
Okay. Well, so anyways.
There we go. Go.
So this is the question that was posed to us to try to address, and what I wanted to try to do is really speak more to this idea that we know all these economic facts, and we have this tremendous amount of science, despite the fact that the conversations over the last day show us that there's still a lot more to know. But the statistics that Sean just cited, about 0.06% of the federal budget and 0.03%, amaze me in the idea of, if we know this coastline, and particularly when it's healthy, is of such great value, why aren't we taking better action, investing more in it, treating it with the respect that it needs, and restoring it. So my organization does a lot of advocacy work. We work at the community level in our restoration projects. So I really want to try to sort of just set the stage a little bit, I think, for some of the broader brushes of this conversation we're going to have. So Sean, the next one.
Joseph's trying to remember.
Okay.
Which one? Joseph?
No, there's like three little symbols at the bottom of that window.
Oh, right there.
Yeah, no,
Over
no,
here.
that one. That's what
Yeah,
you want to
yeah.
click. The little with the stand.
The one on the right?
Yeah.
Awesome. Okay. Now we're back to 0 there.
Yeah, no, it's not working.
So there. Joseph, come back. I'm just going to do it the old-fashioned way, folks.
Just hit return, maybe.
Hit it again. Hit the button again.
I think the apocalypse has started already.
I could have sworn the apocalypse was 6 o'clock
Alright.
this morning. That's what I thought it was supposed to hit. So I'm feeling
Alright,
pretty
read
lucky to
that.
be here. Anyways, we'll work from the small stuff, but because the slides really aren't, you know, I was trying to have a little bit of fun with them, but you know, I kind of laid this out as self-evident truths because they clearly aren't, and you know, you know. When I sat in the room this morning and listened to Dr. Earle talk about sort of the urgency and the criticality of the ocean and the coastal systems to the life support of the planet and to our own self-interest in breathing, I think as somebody put it, and listened to Greg McGilvery, you know, talking about raising awareness or bringing the beauty and the wonder of the ocean and its life to people. And I can't remember exactly how he put it, but he talked about, you know, we're really going to show them how important this is. Again, I keep coming back to this question: why aren't we better stewards of the coast and the ocean? So, and as the question was set up, well, now we're in this nasty time of partisanship. We're in tight budget times, which everybody has dealt with. So, what are some of the approaches that might be key to changing that table in a way that helps us do better coastal restoration in particular? And I'll say part of the, you know, where I'm going to go with this is my organization has been successful in a couple projects recently. One was a grant to do a marine debris cleanup project in Jamaica Bay in New York City that had big elements of community involvement. And then a Clean Water Act funding project through the state of New Jersey to go back and take old historic stormwater basins, which had been built in the 60s, 70s, and 80s without that were designed without a thought of the consequences to Barnegat Bay, which is now severely eutrophied and having all the ecological problems associated with that. And figure out whether we could re-engineer them so that they then remove the nutrients and help deal with some of those problems that we're pressing. So next one. So, you know, the sort of we're trying to get with this: when in Rome, do what the Romans do. I think it's hard to argue that economics and job creation is not the dominant political conversation in this country. And we love the coast and we love the ocean for all these other reasons. There's just a wealth of smart approaches as to how to deal with these issues, whether it's, you know, actual physical restoration of habitat, the restoration of water quality. But I worry that we are, well, I think it's evident because we're not making the progress that the severity, the criticality of the problem deserves. So we're clearly not talking in the right way. And my suggestion would be and we've heard it, and we all have the statistics, you know, readily available to us. We rattle them off, but clearly they haven't. We're talking about jobs. We're talking about economies. You know, why isn't the things that we want to do that are attached to those statistics and those economic arguments? Why aren't they the agenda? Why aren't they the things that are moving forward? And so, you know, I think that while we're having this big national debate about the economy, and it scales down all the way, you know, we just put a piece of legislation to the New Jersey legislature that would have created a fee on impervious coverage in argue is to tag the developers for the externalities that they were talking about earlier, and then take that money and dedicate it to going back and fixing the problems. And whether those problems are putting lost elements of the ecosystem like the shellfish that used to be in the bay there, or restoring stream corridors, or doing better stormwater management. And the governor, it would, so I get all the way through the legislature, and I came out, it took us a year and a half to do it, and the governor vetoes the bill. And the veto message just says, I am opposed to putting taxes on businesses at this time of economic crisis. Right? So we're clearly not making, even despite some of the other successes I described, we're not making the argument as well. Got it. Next one. So, and I won't go through this, but because Sean gave you other stuff, but the ammo's there, right? The arguments are there, but we're clearly, we're not messaging it right. We're not presenting it as the lead argument. We're not finding any traction around the fact, despite the fact that the country is involved in this huge economic argument. Next one. So the other one is the next idea is that if we're waiting for a groundswell of environmentalists, to identify themselves that way and come forward and move it, I think that's a longer term strategy. I mean, clearly there's always the organizing that we all do around specific things, but I think the part of the status quo today argues for finding new and interesting partners to work with, and that we can do that in a way without compromising our values and hopefully moving forward on some of these projects. And I think we heard a lot of examples of it throughout. In the projects I was talking about, we worked with the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey, and these are the guys that like to dredge harbors and build airports, and the New York City Department of Sanitation, Anheuser-Busch through a Ray partnership. In the Barnegat projects, we're working with the Department of Public Works again, the guys that have all the machines. Not your classic environmentalists, but we were able to structure these projects because we started off by saying, well, who can we bring into making this happen? And the fact, restoration is a little bit easier sometimes because of the fact that they are construction projects. So you're already sort of 1 foot into that construction world. But I think that I've seen it, in my years of being in the environmental movement, that sometimes we don't talk outside. And again, it goes back to the first idea that this ought to be self-evident, that we ought to talk to the broader public and find partners. So the next one. And again, just, these are folks that are interested in jobs. We know that there's job creation associated with this restoration work that we want to do. That is what takes us, it's sort of the nuts and bolts back to healthy oceans, healthy ecosystems. Next one. So the last idea would simply be, let's think big. We get, and I'm always a little embarrassed by trying to sort of generalize my experiences being the ones everybody else's, but I spent a lot of time fighting for mountains, for streams, specific mountains, specific streams, as well as regionally on permits and that type of thing. So the next one, Sean. So I think there's a lot of opportunity in trying to find new ways in this nasty partisan atmosphere and with fewer budget dollars available to us by perhaps counterintuitively setting the stage large. Define the vision, and that'll help motivate and bring people to it, but it also helps identify where you might find those partners, how you might be able to frame the economic arguments. We're the ones that need to make those connections, again, more effectively than we've been doing right now, but we should also look for flexibility. So if we work on the watershed scale, we don't necessarily need to get the specific on-the-ground gain in one part. We might be able to get it somewhere else, and I think that reflects this idea of ecosystem-based management. If we have some understanding of how that fits in with how the system naturally works. Again, we need to rely. I think we're the ones that have to provide the vision often, and then use partnerships to make it local and make the vision real. And as I mentioned, Restore America's Estuaries is an interesting approach to this because it's a national alliance of 11 regional groups. So when we all go home, we do our thing in our own estuaries from Puget Sound to San Francisco and around, but we also come back together and get the value of that organizing and collaboration when we try to create the national partnerships that we have with NOAA and with others.
Thank you. Thanks.
Is this the one I push on here?
They should be sending someone down. Just a minute.
Oh, thank you. No.
I'm sorry. You wanted the red button up here. I can't do it upside down. Not that coordinated. And then you want Steve. And then one thing that might help, press this button up here, this little red one there, yep. And then this little thing here, slide that down. This little three things there, slide that down. And then this green one. Oh, it's not going to get any bigger, but just you can then make it bigger. At least sort of 75, maybe 100%.
Maybe that works.
How can I help?
You know, we've recognised now that you really need to look to see how the whole landscape is changing so your wetland is in the right place. Next slide, please. This led to a whole bunch of innovative projects that started up in the 90s, learning from examples that we've seen where we've had some monitoring taking place, such as at Muzzy. This is a dredge material reuse site, sediment from the Port of Auckland, taken 2 million cubic yards, put in here. It was opened up by Al Gore, and it's got a number of innovative features included in it. Oh, and it's now 15 years in, we're still monitoring it, and we're getting features like we've got Californian clapper rail using the site. So we have endangered species using our site, so that was a success. And now things are expanding. This is the Hamilton Air Base, 1,000 acres, which is now actually, this site has now been filled with 7 million cubic yards of dredge material, again from the Port of Auckland expansion. So bringing jobs regionally, but restoring wetlands at the same time. And this is going to be breached in 2014. Next one. And this is more innovative again, we include more features like seasonal wetlands, stormwater pathways, wetlands, and just a picture of it being filled in. Now that the size of the restoration is expanding again, we were involved in working with the Coastal Conservancy and planning for 15,000 acres of restoration in the South Bay Salt Pond project. This is an interesting project, large-scale flood management issues, stormwater management issues. But one of the key features here also is that we don't really know what the landscape is going to look like in 50 years. What are the pressures? And this is a 50-year project, a $1 billion project. So this was innovative in that an EIR was established that you didn't really have a formal goal at the end. It was programmatically very flexible. And through adaptive management and monitoring, the goal will shift and the balance of habitats to be restored will adjust through time. And one of the key features here was that five years previously, Senator Feinstein said, we will fund this project, but you must have something in the ground within 5 years. And we didn't have any EIR, we had no plan. But within 5 years, we had a happy senator. We had a first restoration project in the ground, and she's there with Michelle Orr, who is the consultant lead for this, and also my wife. And so the lessons learned from San Francisco Bay, trying to distill them all down. Inform the public was probably the most significant thing that was done in San Francisco Bay that changed from losing wetlands to actually having accelerating rates of wetlands restoration. It was incredibly important. And informing policy at the same time. Another lesson was do no harm. That's the first law of engineering. And like, don't bring invasive spartina into an area. Don't flood people out. Simple stuff. Be strategic. Have a vision for what you want to do and try and work towards it. You have to be opportunistic, but opportunities do arise. It's those with a vision that get things done. Follow a clear planning process. People don't always like to invest in planning, but you can save a lot of money and a lot of problems by doing planning at the beginning. Restore ecosystem processes. Don't try and just mimic ecosystem structure. Let the habitat evolve naturally. Consider multiple scales, the landscape as well as the project. Consider drivers of geomorphology. Sea level rise is going to be a very important one as we move forward. You've got to incorporate that in the design if you want wetlands restoration to be successful and you want to maintain public support. Integrate science with experimentation, so you're learning through the process, and document and share that knowledge. And finally, be patient. You know, originally we wanted instant wetlands, but now there's recognition. We recognize that it's a trend that was setting up, and it takes time. And a mosaic of habitat is very valuable. I'll leave it there.
Thank you.
So I don't have PowerPoint, so I don't think we're going to have any technical issues.
You know, let me introduce you, however.
Yes,
Okay.
thank you.
This is Teresa Christopher. She is an ocean policy advisor at the recently formed National Ocean Council office. She's responsible for developing council. Prior to joining the National Ocean Council, Teresa served as senior policy advisor at NOAA, overseeing the agency's national ocean policy implementation efforts, and at the White House Council on Environmental Quality, helping to manage the President's Interagency Ocean Policy Task Force. Thank you.
So, nice to see everybody this afternoon. I'm going to talk a bit higher level policy, not so much project specific, but then really get into how you can directly impact what we're doing at the national level. There are three main points I'm going to touch on. I'll start with the policy generally, which I think many of you are familiar with. I'm looking in the audience and I see many familiar faces. Then I'll discuss a bit of how the policy envisions making progress on ocean and coastal restoration. And lastly, I will discuss some of the ways that you can then directly get involved in the implementation of the policy and ensure we are leveraging efforts across levels of government and the private sector, targeting resources effectively, because that, as you've heard over and over, we're in these tight budgetary times, so we are looking on ways to leverage. Many of you are just at the panel downstairs or in the other room, so I'm sure they discussed this Deepwater Horizon, which has shown the health and resiliency of our coastal communities and our nation's long-term economic growth and sustainability relies on the health and resiliency of our ocean and coastal ecosystems. Yet, as many of you know, these resources are at risk due to many of the factors we have previously talked about: global warming, overuse, nutrient and chemical pollution, habitat loss, and other stressors. However, with this first national ocean policy, we are using science as the underpinning of this policy. As we move forward with implementation, we are trying to ensure that the complex policy choices are informed by the best available science. Many of you are familiar with the ocean policy and the final recommendations, and besides the ocean policy, the final recommendations created the National Ocean Council, forming 27 federal entities to provide sustained high-level coordinated attention to advance the policy. So through this council, we are really trying to change the way we do business by combining the efforts of these 27 federal agencies. So bringing EPA and DOT and NOAA and Commerce and Navy and everybody together to really leverage resources looking across the federal government. Through this council, we are bringing together experience and authority in science, natural resources management, economic development, infrastructure planning, public health, and social services. Really trying to address the challenges facing our oceans and coasts today. So to do this, we prioritized, the final recommendations prioritized 9 categories for action. One of which was, and one that I'm going to focus on today, is regional ecosystem restoration and protection. These priority objectives provide a bridge between the policy and specific actions, but do not prescribe in detail how the individual entities will undertake the responsibilities, leaving those details to be determined through these strategic action plans. We are currently in the process of developing these strategic action plans, and this is where I think you can really have an influence in the process and where we focus our resources in leveraging money. The action plans each have to identify specific and measurable near-term, mid-term, and long-term actions. They also have to have appropriate milestones and performance measures. So as you saw, we really can show some of the impacts. We can then hopefully get more money for future, so people understand the connections with jobs and with how it's affecting coastal communities. We So under the ecosystem restoration and protection objective, the final recommendations specifically call for the establishment of an integrated strategy that's science-based and aligns conservation and restoration goals in the federal, state, tribal, and local levels, as well as across the private sector. The actions will be built upon existing efforts and complement projects to restore habitat for valuable fish and wildlife and strengthen coastal communities, making them more resilient to storms, sea level rise, other effects of climate change, and boost the health and resiliency of our nation's coastal and Great Lakes economy. For example, we'll be working to build on efforts in the Great Lakes, the Gulf, the Chesapeake Bay, as well as ongoing restoration projects around the country supported by recovery funds. New Jersey has a couple going on, so does California. We'll be looking to prioritize locations and geographic scope of coastal and Great Lakes restoration projects, and we are also aiming to facilitate collaboration between the public and private sectors by expanding partnerships to increase and leverage resources, as well as specifically improve federal coordination with state efforts. So many states have their priorities, and so we are really trying to look at, okay, what are the states and what are the regions doing, and how can we best leverage those efforts to make sure we're making the most use of those dollars. There's a real opportunity to influence the actions in the Strategic Action Plan, and I would encourage everyone to provide their input to the National Ocean Council on these actions. There are several ways to do this. First, the draft outlines of these plans come out on June 1st. They'll be out for public comment between June 1st and July 1st, so it gives you something to look at and react to and say, you know what, guys, you're right on. This is what we should be doing. These are the actions. Or, you're way off base here. What are you thinking? So I would really encourage everyone to take a look at what's in those outlines. Not the full draft plan. This is still very early in the process, so it's a way to get into the process early and really get your voices heard. Second, the National Ocean Council will actually be holding regional public listening sessions during the month of June. So they'll be holding them around the country. The one in DC is the evening of June 9th. You can get a full list on the Ocean Council website. I believe they just went up yesterday. And if they haven't, then they're going up on Monday. But you can get the full list. There will be at least one, if not more, in every single region. There will be one in New Jersey. There will be one in California. So we're trying to really get around the country. So that is another place to directly engage with the experts and get your input heard into these actions. The third way is that we always have the website up, and I know some of you have already submitted comments. I've read some of them. I know, Sean, you've submitted some. And so all those comments are considered. We read everyone, we take them into consideration, and so I would encourage you, if you can't get to the regional listening session, to submit comments through, that's another way, is the website, and that's just whitehouse.gov/oceans. So it's very easy to find. So using the National Ocean Policy as a guide, and with the full force of the 27 federal agencies and offices, and our partners in states, regions, academia, industry, and you, we have a true opportunity to take some action to restore critical oceans and coasts, to provide health and resilient ocean coastal ecosystems, and to provide for our nation's long-term economic growth and sustainability. And I would be happy to answer additional questions. I know we'll probably talk a little bit about what can we do right now. These action plans aren't going to come out for a little while, but I look forward to the dialogue. Thank you.
Thank you, Teresa.